Hello everyone, this is Olaf from Heritage Wavelength, and today I'm going to talk about ancient glass. Don't forget to check other videos on our channel to learn more about how science helps in the study of the past. This, in my opinion, fairly poetic name reflects the way glass history enthusiasts think about glasses. Vitreous materials are not like any others, and when we study them, they never tell their story straight. I am only in the beginning of the path and have very limited experience, but today I will try to give you a very generic picture of what are they and what challenges scientists are facing when they study them. First things first, we have to define what we are talking about. And it's not very simple. There are many definitions of glass or vitreous state, and at times they are complex, because vitreous materials are very different. Not only modern ones, but even archaeological ones are extremely different. Don't worry if you don't understand these definitions. I had a struggle myself. Archaeologists don't have to define what is glass after all, and more vital skill is to distinguish it in a field. So we move to what makes glass a glass. Glass owes many of its properties to the process that is called glass transition. And I will not go into details here. I will just mention that when we have a liquid and it cools down to a certain point, it usually crystallizes, losing its volume and energy, as is shown on the graph. But if the cooling is happening fast enough, you get a liquid below its melting point. This is called a supercooled liquid, and this is what allows glass to solidify without crystallizing. This is what all those definitions were talking about. The main property of the glass is amorphousness, lack of order between the atoms. Now, you can't say just with looking at it if it's amorphous or not. But there are other properties of vitreous materials. Glass is hard and rigid. Many vitreous materials have luster and are chemically resistant. Big part of objects is colored, other is transparent. They usually have good plasticity when worked, and if we are talking about archaeological ones, they are predominantly silica-based. Vitreous materials are very diverse. Our first example here is glazed tiles. They have crystalline body, but are covered and well appreciated for their vitreous, glassy, decorated surfaces. So only small part of it is actually vitreous, but it has to be studied as a whole. Only in that way you will be able to answer the questions that arise about such artifacts. Same goes for this little hippo made of Egyptian faience. Other two objects are completely or almost completely vitreous. They are man-made glass and natural glass. There are more kinds of natural glasses than just obsidian, and some of them were used by ancient people as well. I will not stop on natural glasses because this topic deserves a separate talk full of geological considerations. There are also other kinds of vitreous materials, and they are important. Since the amorphous state is the definitive feature of vitreous materials, it is important to investigate the so-called degree of crystallinity, which is basically analysis of phases present in the material. On these electron microscope images, you can see the faience with only surface part being purely vitreous. The rest is a mixture of crystalline phases and some of vitreous ones. Important feature of glass is that it is usually non-porous material, unlike ceramics, and these black areas on images is just empty space. Glassy faience is something in the middle between the glass and faience and has many crystalline inclusions embedded into glass matrix. Proper glass might have small amount of inclusions, and those are usually important for optical characteristics of the objects and must be studied. Now we can see how atoms are arranged in glass. We call this a network, and it is primarily made of distorted polyhedra of silicon and oxygen. You might note other atoms that find their place in this network. They all have their functions and are not there by mistake. Raw materials for glass production can be different, and this scheme is far from being complete. As we have seen in a previous slide, the main component of glass structure is silicon that was coordinated with oxygen. Silica is usual network former in archaeological glasses, but it is not the only one. Vast majority of ancient glasses were made using it, though. The best available source of silica is mineral quartz. Sands rich in quartz were extensively used for glass production, but other sources are also known. There is one complication. Quartz melts at very high temperature that was impossible to achieve in ancient furnaces. That is why a fluxing agent was needed to bring the melting temperature of the whole mixture down. These fluxes were usually high alkali substances, such as different kinds of plant ashes or mineral deposits, most important of which was Egyptian natron. The glass made just with those two components was not stable. It is actually soluble, so alkali earth elements, predominantly calcium, were added to stabilize the network. The most common source of this stabilizing component were shell fragments or limestone. They are quite related materials if you think of it. It is now time to take a look at the minor components of glass that, just like spices in a dish, can change it completely. Glass can be colored, opacified, stained, and painted. It is important to distinguish between these transformations. Coloring of glasses was usually done by addition of transition metals that colored the bulk of the glass. Staining is coloring of the thin layer of the glass surface. Opacification is making the glass opaque, usually with the addition of crystals. And finally, painting is just applying a layer of paint on top of glass surface. It doesn't entail any chemical interactions. Another part of this video concerns ancient glass studies. We will try to find the answer to 4 main questions. What can glass composition tell us? What can glass structure tell us? How are technology studies done? And how are provenance studies done? Glass composition hides the answers to many questions. We can relate chemically close glasses on different levels. We get to know what raw materials were used in glass production. We get to know why it appears like that. All above considered, we get to know probable provenance. This donut on the right represents modern common glass composition. But also many colorless Roman glasses would fit. Common glass haven't changed this much since then, but there are varieties that would make this donut look completely different. Structure of material can be studied on different levels. On macro level, we can understand what kind of material we are dealing with, how it was shaped. Remember the comparison between faience and glass? On micro and nano levels, we can study appearance aspects, like color or opacity, technological aspects, like mechanism of glazing, and conservation aspects, like glass decay. This can be seen in the top right corner. Glass decay is another big topic and deserves separate video. I will not speculate on that now. Replicating experiments are very important in technology studies of glass making, because similar composition can be obtained in multiple ways, and it is fun to do. I personally never done those, but I really want to. When you replicate, you always check if composition and properties of your product match with those of an ancient one. If there is a difference in composition or structure, you must always try to explain it and probably try again. In any case, you can base your study on the other people's experiments, and it is not so fun but still valuable. Provenance studies are extremely fascinating. Basic paths of those are discrimination and grouping of objects. They can be done by finding similar objects by composition and structure of known origin and by comparing the objects chemically to its raw materials. This can be done on different levels. Studies that give the most of certainty are the ones based on trace elements content and those based on isotopic ratios. Even with the most advanced technologies, the success is not guaranteed. Glasses are complex materials that are made with a mixture of raw materials, and the representation of those raw materials within the glass might not be clear. Can we actually answer the questions above? Glass is difficult to study, that's why I like it. We have to consider a lot of technical details when building the methodology. And most importantly, we have to ask our questions right. In many cases, you will face the limitations that are very difficult to overcome. If you think that if you got some number and you can believe it, you will very soon find yourself in a difficult situation. Glasses mostly consist of relatively light elements that are not always detectable and or quantifiable with conventional methods. If you want a clearer picture, the invasiveness is inevitable, and this is not a great news for cultural heritage objects. The study might be too costly or the outcome is not even worth publishing. In any case, one must study the object as a whole and try to explain all the features of material to the best of his or her knowledge. Since we are on YouTube, I don't want to put a proper reference list in the end. There is only one book that I recommend, and it is here for those who are thinking to study ancient vitreous objects. There you will find a good overview of methods that are used today with some case studies. The rest are links to different websites where you can learn more about ancient glass history and technology, or just enjoy looking at pieces of art made with glass. We are not sponsored by those websites. Thank you for your attention. I hope that this little and somewhat oversimplified presentation was at least useful, if not entertaining. Please write your questions in the comments. Subscribe to this channel if you want to learn more about other materials and applications of science to cultural heritage. Keep yourself safe, wash your hands, and make new discoveries. Goodbye.